My father raised his wine glass like he was about to offer a blessing, but instead he said, "Some children shine. And some just take up space." The entire table at my aunt's 60th birthday in Savannah, Georgia erupted into laughter. My older sister, Caroline, didn't even bother hiding her smirk. My mother stared down at her napkin. And me? I simply met my father's satisfied, dismissive gaze and said, "Good thing I just signed a lease." 5,000 miles away. Silence. Forks stopped. Someone dropped a spoon. They thought that was the shock, but they had no idea what I had already uncovered or what I was about to reveal. I'm Lydia Hart, 32 years old, and I grew up in a house where love was conditional and pride had only one direction. Our home in Savannah's historic district looked warm from the outside porch, lanterns glowing, magnolia trees swaying, neighbors greeting us like we were the picture of Southern grace. Inside, everything orbited around my father's personal definition of worth. And worth, in his eyes, began and ended with Caroline. She was the golden daughter long before either of us even understood the game. Her debate trophies decorated the living room mantel like a museum installation. My robotics medals, stuffed in plastic grocery bags inside the hallway closet to avoid clutter. When Caroline received a scholarship, Dad announced it at church. When I landed my first engineering patent, he said, "That's nice, Lydia. Don't make your sister feel overshadowed." 1,000 tiny cuts wrapped in polite Southern smiles. Mom wasn't cruel. She was afraid. She'd straighten tablecloths when Dad's tone sharpened or whisper, "Honey, just let him have this." Her silence taught me early that my feelings were a burden. The attic became my escape. It smelled like cedar, paper, and freedom. While downstairs echoed with Caroline's victories, upstairs belonged to me, my wires, my circuits, my quiet. Only Aunt Rosalind ever really saw me. She'd stop by with peach scones and ask about whatever invention cluttered my desk. "You don't think small, Lydia," she'd say. "People who think small will never understand you. Don't let anyone tell you that's wrong." Aunt Rosalind had said it softly, like someone who understood that softness couldn't survive long in our house. By the time I turned 18, I had mastered Dad's preferred traits: quiet and useful, nothing more. When I got into a competitive engineering program on the West Coast, he didn't even lower the sports section. "That far?" he muttered. "Handle it yourself." So I did. I worked evening shifts at a hardware store, saved every cent, and boarded a flight with nothing but a worn backpack and a scholarship letter no one at home had celebrated. For years, I believed distance might make my father finally see me. But distance doesn't fix a blindness someone chooses. And that night, when he lifted his glass at my aunt's birthday and declared I took up space, something inside me snapped, not loudly, but cleanly. He would never see me. But someone else was about to. After his toast, the room felt tilted, as if gravity had exposed every crack we'd all been trained to pretend wasn't there. Caroline smirked behind her champagne flute. My nieces whispered to each other, sensing mockery without understanding it. My mother's fork carved the same trembling path across her plate. It was the kind of silence that doesn't protect, it exposes. I should have cried. I should have defended myself. That's the script they expected. Instead, something inside me locked into place, quiet, steady, unshakable. I lifted my glass and smiled. A real one this time. "Well," I said gently, "good thing I just signed a lease." 5,000 miles away. Each word landed like a soft blade. Then I added, "Don't worry, you'll never have to make space for me again." Forks froze midair. A chair scraped. Even the children stopped whispering. My father's jaw clenched, not from guilt, but from losing control of the narrative he'd written for decades. Caroline blinked, unsure whether to laugh or defend the hierarchy that had always favored her. I placed my napkin down, rose from my seat, and said, "Thank you for dinner." My mother whispered my name, small, frightened. But I wasn't leaving to create drama. I was leaving because, for the first time, I finally saw the truth of that table. Who mattered, who didn't, and who never would. Outside, the Savannah air bit sharply against my skin. The Hart house looked exactly the same as it had my whole life. Yet suddenly it seemed smaller, almost fragile. I could still hear their muffled voices behind the closed door, first confusion, then irritation, then the predictable dismissal. The same pattern my family always fell into. "She's dramatic. She's ungrateful. She's too sensitive. But not one of them followed me outside. As I drove through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Savannah, memories rose like ghosts, the ones I'd packed away but never truly outrun. Caroline blowing out candles on a tiered cake that read Prodigy Princess while mine sat half-melted from the grocery store freezer. Dad cheering so loudly at Caroline's debate finals he lost his voice, but forgetting the day of my regional invention expo. Mom smoothing tension like a tablecloth instead of ever stepping between me and the hurt. The pattern had always been there. I had simply stopped telling myself it might change. By the time I reached the little inn where I was staying near Forsyth Park, something inside me shifted from hurt to clarity. Leaving that table wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a boundary none of them believed I would ever draw. I opened a message thread I hadn't touched in months, the one with Aunt Rosalind. I typed, "I'm in town. Can I see you tomorrow?" Her reply came almost instantly, warm and steady. "Of course, darling. Anytime." For the first time that night, my chest loosened enough for air to move freely. As I lay in the dark replaying Dad's words take up space, something unexpected bloomed inside me. Not anger. Not grief. Resolve. If they wanted to reduce me to empty space, they were about to learn what I could build with it. I met Aunt Rosalind the next morning at a small diner she adored, the kind with mismatched mugs and the smell of buttered biscuits drifting through every corner. She waved the moment I stepped inside, her silver-streaked hair catching the morning light like something kind in a world that often wasn't. When I slid into the booth, she didn't ask what happened. She simply reached across the table, took my hand and said, "You look tired, Lydia, not in your face, in your spirit." The words hit harder than anything from the night before. We talked for hours about Seattle, about my work, about the apartment I had shaped into a home of my own. She asked for photos, and when she saw the long walnut dining table I'd chosen, she smiled. "Equal seats," she said softly. "Good girl." Only then did she ask, "So, what did he say this time?" I repeated Dad's toast. Her eyes fluttered shut. When she opened them, her voice trembled. "You deserved better than that from the day you were born." After breakfast we drove back to her house. She walked slowly, leaning on the railing, but her spirit was as bright as ever. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old books, safe, familiar, everything my childhood home never was. Photographs lined Aunt Rosalind's hallway, weddings, birthdays, holidays, and almost none included me. Not because she didn't love me, but because no one in my family ever bothered to capture the moments I existed in. She sat beside me and said quietly, "Your father has always confused control with love. He built a world where only one child was allowed to shine." And Caroline never questioned the spotlight. She didn't need my reply. She already knew. While she napped, I wandered her living room and noticed a stack of bills, quiet proof of someone aging, someone managing too much alone. I saw how many decisions she had surrendered for peace, the same way I once had. And I knew I wouldn't abandon her the way my father had abandoned me. Returning to Seattle the next week, the city's gray mist felt like relief. My apartment no longer felt like escape. It felt like ownership. I rearranged furniture, hung new curtains, added fresh flowers. I built a life intentionally, piece by piece. Work expanded too. I was trusted with major engineering projects requiring precision and long nights. I didn't brag or send updates home. I let my work speak. Seattle wasn't where I hid, it was where I grew. For Christmas, I hosted dinner for the people who had shown up for me, my neighbor, who fixed my heater, my old professor, a colleague who once drove me to urgent care. A mismatched but beautiful group. When they sat at my long walnut table, equal seats for every person, something loosened in my chest. I didn't realize those photos of warm lights and warmer faces would travel far beyond Seattle, all the way back to Savannah, straight into the hands of the people who said I took up too much space. 3 days after Christmas, while drying dishes, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. I nearly ignored it, but instinct made me answer. My father didn't say hello. "The whole town's talking about you." I leaned against the counter. "About me?" "Those pictures," he snapped. "People are saying you replaced your real family. Your cousin posted, Lydia finally built her own table." Asway. Then came the truth. Sharp as always. "Do you know how that makes us look?" If you want to hear what I told my father next and how everything changed, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this journey. I kept my voice steady. I didn't post anything. You didn't have to, he snapped. Those photos are everywhere. Your mother can't even buy milk without someone asking what happened between us. I exhaled slowly. That sounds like a question you should have answered years ago. Silence followed, thick, heavy, charged. Then, in that low, clipped tone he always used when he felt control slipping, he said, "You embarrassed us." I almost laughed. Embarrassed them? By having a warm dinner with people who cared. By smiling in a photo. By sitting at my own table instead of the one they kept me beneath. Before I could reply, another voice drifted through the receiver. Softer. Older. "Lydia? Sweetheart? Aunt Rosalind." My throat tightened. "I'm here. I saw the photos," she said, her voice trembling not with anger but with ache. "It looked beautiful, honey." Dad cut in sharply. "Rosalind, stay out of—" "No." Her voice was firm. "Clear. You've controlled this family long enough." It sounded like glass cracking, quiet, but devastating. She spoke only to me. "You built something gentle. Something safe. That's nothing to be ashamed of." My eyes closed. "Thank you." Dad began pacing. I could hear the thud of his shoes hitting hardwood. "So that's it? You run off, play independent, and make us look like villains." I opened my eyes. "Dad, you lifted a glass and told a room full of people I take up space. That was a joke." "It wasn't," I said softly. "And you know it." He inhaled sharply. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, less fire, more calculation. "You're coming home for New Year's Eve. We need to fix this. It's no Encrest. Years ago, that would have pulled me back. Not anymore. I'm not walking into that house unless we sit at the same table. Equal seats. No head of the table. No hierarchy. If you want a conversation, that's the condition." A long silence. Then, "Fine." I hadn't expected that. The next afternoon, my parents arrived in Seattle. The knock on my apartment door sounded like a pulse, steady, foreboding. I opened it to see the two people who shaped my childhood in every painful way. My mother stood behind Dad, eyes lowered, unable or unwilling to meet mine. My father stepped inside, his gaze flicking around my Seattle apartment, hunting for something to criticize. "Nice place," he muttered, like the words didn't fit his mouth. I didn't let the moment stretch. "Dinner's ready." The long walnut table filled the room, lit by warm lamps and the glow of the city outside. 3 identical chairs, no head of the table. My father noticed. Stayed silent. We sat. My mother's compliment was barely a whisper. My father chewed stiffly, jaw tight, eyes drifting to the framed photos, me with friends, colleagues, neighbors. People who'd shown up. No pictures of him. I felt no guilt. Halfway through the meal, he finally spoke. "So, you're doing well." "I am. And you didn't think to tell us?" "You've never wanted to hear it." He looked ready to fire back, but instead he slumped a little, exhaling. "Maybe we didn't do everything right. Is er fine unsteaded?" My mother's eyes brimmed. "Lydia, we never meant to make you feel less. Intentions don't erase impact." Dad's voice sharpened. "We protected Caroline. She needed more. She needed more because you handed her everything," I said. "And I learned to survive alone." For the first time, he looked smaller, exposed. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke the truth I had carried for years. "You told people I take up space. But I built a life 5,000 miles away from you. My own table. My own community. My own peace." He flinched just a twitch, but enough. Then he whispered, almost fragile, "I didn't know how to love you the way you needed." My mother reached across the table, her hand shaking. "Can we try? Even if it's slow?" I leaned back, city lights flickering like a pulse. "I'm not coming home," I said. "But you're welcome to visit if you sit as equals. If you show up the way you didn't before." My father nodded, once stiff but sincere. "We'll try." End quote. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a neat ending. But it was the first crack in a wall I'd spent my whole life standing outside. When they left, the door clicked softly behind them, gentle instead of sharp. I walked onto the balcony, letting the cold Seattle air settle over me, and realized something. I hadn't only stood up for myself at that table in Savannah. I had rewritten the rules. And for the first time, my father had followed them. New Year's morning broke across the city like someone had washed everything clean. My apartment was quiet again, no tension, no forced politeness, no invisible accusations. Just stillness, a kind I had never known in the Hart house. Their visit hadn't solved everything, nor erased years of shrinking to fit the space they allowed. But something had shifted, fragile, tentative, real. A few days later, Aunt Rosalind called. "He told me what happened," she said. "He didn't yell. He didn't blame. He listened." I pressed my forehead to the window, fog feathering across the glass. "I don't know what comes next." "You don't have to," she said. "Just keep choosing yourself." Choosing myself looked like small freedoms: cooking without rushing, inviting friends over, walking through the city without apologizing for existing. I rebuilt slowly, intentionally. When a colleague congratulated me on a project, I let the praise land instead of ducking away from it. I realized how long I'd practiced shrinking to avoid resentment. But I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding in an attic or basement waiting for permission to shine. One evening, setting a single plate at my walnut table, I paused. That table had once been rebellion. Now, it was a promise, a place where I belonged, where I could take up space without fear. New Year's night settled over the bay, soft and steady. And for the first time in years, I felt the same, not because my family had changed, but because I had. I stepped onto the balcony, whispered the truth it took years to earn. Some kids make their parents proud. Others make themselves free. If you've ever fought to take up space in a room that wasn't built for you, I hope my story reminds you that your worth isn't defined by anyone's approval. Comment below, and tell me if you've ever had to rebuild your own peace. I read every message. And if you're standing at the edge of your own beginning, here's my advice. Choose yourself with the same loyalty you once gave others. It changes everything.